Hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I hope that music gave you a little bit of energy like it gave it me. You're very welcome to our fourth and final Startup Global webinar of 2024 International Marketing Strategy. I'm Isabel Nolan. I'm the Director of Programs at Startup Canada. And to begin, I would like to acknowledge the land on which I am on today is located on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, also known as Vancouver. And as we are a national organization, I'd also like to acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous peoples. And I encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territory that you're residing on today. Today's session is being recorded and we'll share it afterwards through our YouTube channel. So we invite all of our attendees here today to introduce yourselves, connect with each other in the chat. Feel free to share a name, your organization, where you're joining us from, and make sure that you're sending your messages to everyone in the room. Zoom defaults to only send it to myself and the panelists, so you just need to adjust that setting. A little bit about Startup Canada, if you're not familiar with us. We're a national nonprofit that's the gateway to Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem. So we're here to connect entrepreneurs with the support, community, and tools that they need to build a successful business in Canada. And since launching in 2012, Startup Canada has grown to support more than 130,000 entrepreneurs annually and an ever-growing grassroots community network from coast to coast to coast. And the Startup Global program is one of Startup Canada's flagship programs that supports entrepreneurs looking to export and expand their businesses internationally. From webinars like this to export readiness resources and exclusive offerings from our partners, this free program will help you build an international market entry strategy and plan. And so I'll take a little moment to thank all of our wonderful partners. So thank you to our co-presenting partners, UPS and Export Development Canada, as well as our program partners, Forum for International Trade Training, also known as FITT, and our ecosystem partners, Scotiabank and Startup TNT, and our community partners, GS1, North Forge, Toronto Region Bot, IPIC and NCFDC. We'll add information about each of those partners into the chat today if you'd like to learn more. So today's conversation, we're going to be focusing on aligning your export goals with specific market needs. As you begin to export, it's important to develop a marketing plan that's specific to the market that you are entering. They all have unique values and needs, so you need to ensure that you are sending the right message to the specific group of consumers that you're targeting. So I'll help equip you with tools to create an effective marketing plan for your export goals. We've prepared some questions for our panelists. However, if you do have a question, you can write it in the Q&A box at the bottom function bar on your screen, and we'll do our best to answer it live for you. So without further ado, I'm honored to introduce you to today's speakers. We have Lora Rigutto, the Partnerships and Community Lead at Forum for International Trade Training, Alejandra Guerrero, who is the co-founder and CEO of Everly, and Roberto Bagnato, the marketing business partner of Indo-Pacific Strategy and Marketing Investments for US and Europe for Export Development Canada. Thank you all so much for being here today. So we have a lot to unpack in an hour, but I think it would be great to give each of our attendees a sense of who you are and a little bit about your background. So Alejandra, I'll pass it over to you first.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. My name's Alejandra. I'm the founder of Everly, a refillable candle company based out of Toronto, Canada. Previous to Everly, I was managing director of an e-commerce agency called Labellium out of Toronto, where I worked with startups all the way to Fortune 500 companies. So that really gave me a nice foundation for what I do today with Everly. And I'm so thrilled to be here talking about marketing, one of the loves of my life.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Roberto, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Isabel. And thank you very much to Startup Canada for the invite. Really excited to join us today with a really, really great group of panelists here. So I'm Roberto from Export Development Canada. We're Canada's export credit agency. If that doesn't mean a lot to you, there's no problem because it's unfamiliar for a lot of folks as well. Essentially, we help Canadian businesses export their goods or services and grow global as well. We do so through a few different ways. The first is on the financing perspective. We'll work with exporters, financial institutions, to help get them access to capital to grow and export internationally. We'll help support by mitigating the risk of selling internationally through our series of credit insurance programs as well. And lastly, we help support on the connection side. So we've got over 25 offices globally. Their role is to connect Canadian companies to international buyers across the globe and promote Canadian goods to each one of them too. We work within the Team Canada or Government of Canada ecosystem as well. So along with our partners, Trade Commissioner Service, Global Affairs Canada as well, among many others too. Just to highlight our magnitude of support as well, 2023, our financial products supported more than $130 billion in exports, foreign investment, and trade development activities. So we like to say if a product or service is being exported, we likely have a little hand in that too. So really excited for today and to chat marketing with the group too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Roberto. And Laura.
Great, thank you. So Lora Rigutto, I am a CITP, which stands for Certified International Trade Professional. So that is a designation certified by FITT. So FITT is too many acronyms in this world, but FITT is the Forum for International Trade Training. So we are the global leader in specific training with companies are looking to cross international borders or procure products. So we have that international trade training as well as the certification of international trade professionals. So we firmly believe that trade does not happen without trade capable people. So there's a specific skill set that's required to navigate all of these complexities when you're trying to market your products in overseas markets, or you're trying to, on the procurement side, the import side, if you're trying to source, find suppliers, there's a whole series of from A to Z of complexities that are unique to international trade. We do partner with EDC. We have our learning center, which is the EDC FITT Learning Center. And in fact, since we're talking international marketing, FITT has a specific course that's international sales and marketing. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is we go through that in the course. So happy to get started and answer any questions that anybody has.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think safe to say that we have some brilliant minds as our speakers today. So I think there's going to be a lot of advice and knowledge sharing that you'll be able to provide our attendees both today and anyone that is watching the recording. So I think it would be great to perhaps outline common challenges that entrepreneurs are probably facing when they're looking to expand globally. But more importantly, how are they going to overcome these obstacles and mitigate these risks? So Alejandra, maybe can I go to you first and ask, was there one specific challenge that you were facing when you were looking at taking your product from Canada and going out to the US?
So yes, so many challenges, but I think one of the biggest ones that if I could rewind time and know what I know now, would have done differently, would have been around our product packaging. So we have a product, Everly is a refillable candle company. Our system refills any container, so it's agnostic to the container. Our whole mission is to divert containers from landfills. And it's a beautiful story. It's a really cool product. And we're able to communicate what we do really well via video content. And so our e-commerce has performed really well. There was absolutely no risk to us opening up our sales to the US and shipping, from our warehouse in Canada. But when it came to retail distribution, the big challenge that I learned was that our packaging that was performing really well online, because we had all that content to support, what the product was, how it works and everything, it didn't really have that impact at retail. So one of the things that has been a challenge for us, not just in entering into the US, I mean, it has been entering to the US, but just getting distribution in the US. And then once we've gotten distribution, actually like succeeding at retail, has been that our packaging really hasn't been like really speaking to the consumer when they look at it at retail without the videos to support like how the product works and everything that we have online. So if I could do, you don't know what you don't know, I guess, when you start this journey, but if I could do things over again, I think I would have studied, my product packaging a little bit more, gotten a cohort of, to research really like, what are those things that we need to highlight on our packaging where, you can snap your fingers and understand what the product is just from looking at it. I think that for sure has been a really big challenge. And I think just to take that one step further, the things that you might think, that resonate in Canada, for example, even though the US is a similar market, they might not be the exact same thing that resonate for the US consumer. So I think if I could do things over from the beginning, I would have done a little bit more study on my product packaging before committing to like a really large PO, which we did for product packaging. So that's I would say number one for us for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Roberto, any specific challenges that you're seeing entrepreneurs when they're entering these new markets?
Yeah, I think almost to take one step backwards, it's knowing which market to go to first. And we often see that being a challenge, especially with newer exporters as well. I think the default location is to look to our partners at the south of the US. Logistically, they're closer, culturally, very similar. Obviously, language with English speaking as well makes it much easier. But the opportunity and oftentimes the fit of a product isn't always there as well. And so our first conversation we often have with exporters is looking at the size of the opportunity and looking at the market from a data lens as well. And so what we always recommend is taking a deep dive into that. What often isn't possible is taking time away from your business to do that. So working with a partner can be quite crucial in trying to size the right opportunity, trying to understand what are the sensitivities in that market for my product or service as well. There's a lot of public sources of data available as well. If you look at Statista, Kaggle, but also with partners as well. One of our favorites, and we actually had them join a webinar recently as well with Export Development Canada and with Lora as well, is WPIC Marketing Technologies. And it's their bread and butter. And looking at, before we start talking about getting your goods and services somewhere else, it's let's start to do a market scan and let's do a deep dive on the data side. So I would say knowing which market to export to is that first stop, and likely one of the most common challenges we see too.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Lora, specific challenges?
I love coming after these two because Roberto, you stole one of mine. So I would say after, determining if it's truly feasible to export to that market, do you have potential, do you have a customer base in that market? The next biggest challenge I find is that once that target market has been identified and it's been identified that, it is feasible to export there, is that perhaps there's a marketing plan, a domestic marketing plan, or a marketing plan for a specific target market, but then it's just cookie cutter. So they replace, company A with company B, and they think that that marketing mix should remain the same. So I'm here to dispel some of that, because your marketing mix has to be unique for every target market. And even if we talk about the US market, the market in California is very different than the market in New York or Midwest market. So knowing specifically your target market and then creating that marketing mix to match for that particular market, super important. And it's a challenge. And if it's not done right, you could miss the mark.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of our attendees today, or anyone watching this, will resonate with each and every one of those challenges. So thank you for kind of shifting as well, and ways that they can possibly mitigate making any of those mistakes, or how they can navigate through that when they're starting this journey. Roberto, you talked a little bit about understanding the target market. I'd love to go into that a little bit more. So how can entrepreneurs effectively understand and then adapt to those different cultural nuances of a new market, and maybe what are some of the common pitfalls to avoid?
Definitely. I think for this example, let's move away from the US and maybe let's look at Asia as well. And it's a market that we're very heavily investing in with EDC. We've now have 11 Indo-Pacific representation offices to connect Canadian buyers into the region. But part of the role is also to understand what are the market trends in each one of those countries in the Indo-Pacific as well, and how can we bring that information back to Canadians. And one of the most common pieces of advice we get from our chief representatives and in-market staff to Canadian companies is don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions on branding or language or products or service specific as well. Working with a local product could be crucial for the success of your business. So not only from a distribution perspective, but actually understanding some of the consumption habits in that market if we're looking from a product specific point of view, or even from a service perspective for that region, for that as well. These local experts can help you get into local sales channels as well. So they'll take some of the risk away from getting your product and having some of those conversations with buyers in those regions, but they'll also help you adapt your product or service as well. And so the easiest way to get connected to some of those local partners are working with our Team Canada group of services as well. So the Trade Commissioner service is one of those that invaluable service truly to Canadian companies looking to export. They'll work with you to identify some of your target markets, break down and identify opportunities within your sector or subsector, but ultimately connect you to buyers and partners in the region who can ultimately help.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm seeing some really great questions coming through in our chat. And some of them, we already kind of had them planned out, which is great, but that means we've drafted some good questions. If you do have a question, can I ask you to put it into the Q&A box, just so it doesn't get lost in the chat. But there's some really great questions, so we will get to all of those. But thank you so much, Roberto, for kind of bringing us through, some of those pitfalls to avoid, and understanding those nuances. And Alejandra, I wanted to go to you about, there's a similar question in the chat about market research tools and techniques that early stage entrepreneurs can utilize when they're either researching what market to go into, or they're trying to learn more about the market that they're going into. Was there any specific tools or resources that you used when you were doing this?
So this is, again, where I say if I could backtrack, I would have done all of this. And there is a tool that I love called Social Nature. Little disclaimer is that I do work with them as well. Like, I support them in some things, so you need to know that. But they are amazing. One of the reasons why I decided to work with them is because it is such a great tool. And I speak to founders every day and their challenges. And it's a tool that, we also work with super early stage brands all the way to established brands. But one of the capabilities is all the data and insights that come out of campaigns that we run for brands. So I think in my example, specifically around the product packaging, I could have gotten Social Nature's help at this point to help me distribute some products to like a cohort of people in areas where, where I'm interested in entering a market, to get feedback specifically from those people. Anything from like, do they like the product? What do they think about the language on the front of the packaging? What would make the front of the packaging more clear for them? So there's so many ways to set up these programs to get the insights that we're looking for. So that's a tool that I know, for anybody in the US or Canada would be super helpful. I'm sure there's, other tools like that for more international markets like Asia, but I would definitely start to take a look at Social Nature if you're like an early stage brand trying to get that feedback before, making a massive commitment for a PO, whether it's packaging or the product itself, right? Because that's, I think, when as a brand things can get really dangerous, is making decisions in a way a little bit blind, committing committing money to that, and then you're stuck with a bunch of inventory, a bunch of product packaging that maybe wasn't the best for the intention that you had. So definitely check out socialnature.com, and you can reach out to me if you want to chat about that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alejandra. Lora, how about, from FITT side, or any other resources or tools that you could recommend?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. It depends. Are we talking B2B, B2C, like industry specific? So I see some of the questions and coming in through the chat and the Q&A. I guess it all depends on knowing your industry and knowing where to find that data. So I worked in the clean technology space, and that data on customers and customer profiles, et cetera, it wasn't readily available. We had to do a lot of our own research to gather that information. So it depends. It depends. But what I do want to say, we're talking, a lot of the questions are centered around secondary research, right? Research that you can find, reports, maybe reports that you can buy from, I think, Roberto, you mentioned Statista. They have phenomenal market research reports that you can purchase. But what I want to say is that often that research that you need is primary research. And going to trade shows, for instance, is a phenomenal way to obtain that data that you might require. So, Alejandra, you were saying if you could reverse the clock and go back and do it again, you would have, maybe done a focus group or something on your packaging. So sometimes when you go to an industry specific trade show, you have buyers, you have potential distributors, you have potential channel partners, all under one roof. Your competitors are there too, so you can see what others are doing. You can talk to your distributors to see, well, this product as it stands now in your market, would you change something, or this software? I know people are asking about specifically for services, but trade shows for your industry is just phenomenal and very cost effective way of getting that market research, that data that you need.
Excellent, thanks so much. Yeah, and that's definitely something that there's a few organizations that can help you with either those trade shows or even reaching out to TCS as well. They're a great resource on going on those trade missions. I'm seeing a few more questions, and some of them are going to tie in. So I will get to some of them. I want to make sure we're kind of keeping in line with the different topics that we want to hit today. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the brand and marketing strategies itself. So a lot of the times whether you're product-based, service-based, and you're starting out in Canada, you're really able to build out your brand and kind of test out what's working, what isn't working within the Canadian market. But then going beyond that, you want to ensure that you can keep that consistency. Even though you might have to change your marketing strategies, you want to make sure that your brand is staying consistent and as a whole, you're still staying true to those values. So Roberto, maybe can I go to you first on how can entrepreneurs maintain brand consistency when adapting their messaging to different cultural contexts? So maybe some best practices on that cross-cultural branding.
Definitely. No, definitely I will. And I think there's almost two misconceptions when selling your goods or services internationally. One, it's I need to change drastically. I need to change drastically for an international market, and that includes changing packaging and logos and colors, etc. And the other school of thought is I'm going to change nothing. I'm going to go to a market because what worked in the US is going to work in Mexico, or what worked in Vietnam is going to work in Indonesia. And truly a mix of both are where we feel like most product or service companies should go. I think the first piece of advice is stay true to your core brand values. And so that means while color preferences might differ in different markets, or packaging, as Alejandra mentioned as well, might change in different markets as well. Stay true to what your product or service is core at. And so if it's snacks, then ensure that the health food component of those snacks are prominent here in Canada or in the US or in Mexico, wherever you're selling to. One of my favorite examples of this without altering the product at all was actually Joseph from WPIC Marketing shared with our group too. And it was they were challenged by one of their customers, Vitamix, in their Asian growth strategy. So for those who don't know, Vitamix is a prominent blender company here in North America. Well, one of the top blenders as well, more of a premium product. And they were challenged with trying to get into the Chinese market. And so if you think of the North American lifestyle and the Chinese lifestyle, one of the biggest differences is scale. And so North America, we love things, bigger and better and more premium. And candidly, in the Chinese market, it's much more simple. So smaller homes or condos or apartments, much more simple items that can do a multitude of purposes. And so when you look at a blender is typically used for a smoothie or to aid in cooking. And so what they did was when they looked at the Chinese market, they looked at this huge trend in health food and more health conscious consumers as well, and this huge shift of not always buying processed foods. And so they worked with Vitamix to create this slate of digital marketing and influencer marketing campaigns that showcased prominent individuals utilizing Vitamix for healthy food options. And so instead of buying soy milk at the store, making your own soy milk at home, or showcasing how you can use the Vitamix for a multitude of functions. And so now that's changed Vitamix's exports and their export mix as well. And the Chinese market now, after a few years, and there's one of their top export markets globally. So I think a huge example of not altering your product at all, but altering the messaging with a very, very slight understanding of what resonates in that market as well.
Excellent example. Thank you so much. Alejandra, was there anything specific that you did to keep the strong brand that you had built in Canada when you were starting to export to the US, or anything that you felt you had to change, aside, of course, from the packaging for the retailers?
I feel like I don't have a better answer than Roberto on this one. That was such an excellent answer. It's such a drastic difference between the US market and Asia. For us, like in Canada, US, it wasn't that big of a drastic difference. I think, talking about values specifically, one of our big values is this focus on sustainability and producing things locally and trying to minimize impact, compostable packaging, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the, I would say, challenges for us as we think about expanding internationally, and we get requests from Brazil, requests from New Zealand, we get so many requests all over the world for distribution down there. And our challenge is, how can we stay true to our biggest brand value of sustainability when we produce everything in Canada, right? Shipping everything internationally, this and that. So that's always been, it's a nut we're still trying to crack. And I think eventually, if we do want to expand internationally like that, it's finding, a manufacturing partner in a different country and having like local shipping there and everything. So that's going to be, like, as we think about expanding, a real big challenge, because it is important for us. Like, our biggest value is that value of sustainability, right? So yeah, still trying to figure that one out.
No, thank you. And have you found that that's been like a key differentiator to, other companies in the same industry as you, like staying true to that sustainability core and kind of saying no, not yet to these, interested markets?
It's definitely a differentiator, but it definitely, I guess, the more you pigeonhole yourself into that space, the more challenging it becomes. Things become a little bit more expensive. So as far as a business decision, I'm not sure if it has been like the best business decision, but truly, like, this company started from like a place of the heart. It is a differentiator. And I think one of our biggest differentiators as well, I mean, there are other refillable candle companies out there. Our biggest differentiator is that we are container agnostic. So our whole mission is to divert containers that are used from landfills, because you can refill anything with our products. So huge differentiator, but also really just huge part of our values. We're 1% for the planet. So it's something that as we scale, it's something we're not willing to sacrifice. So maybe we are contained to a certain market, and that's ultimately going to be okay with us.
I love that, really, that really putting that at the forefront and not budging on it is very commendable for sure. Lora, can you talk a little bit about the digital marketing strategies for expanding to a new market? How can entrepreneurs maybe leverage social media or SEOs, content marketing, in reaching these new markets, or rather customers in these new markets?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to what was already said about how do you keep your brand and your branding when you're going into international markets. I think a lot of it, and it depends again on your market entry strategy, but you have to, I don't want to say police, but you do have to manage what your channel partners are saying about your product. You have to manage that messaging. And so, for instance, even something like putting your logo on their website. I've seen I've seen logos distorted and stretched, and you have to manage your brand guidelines. You have to manage that with your channel partners. So for the service companies that are online, for product exporters too, like that is an area that you really do have to manage. You can't just let your channel partners go off and distort your brand, and the messaging and everything you've built up for so many years. So be careful of that. In terms of digital marketing, obviously it looks, strategies look very different for all exporters, but I would say in terms of digital marketing strategies for you have to look to see the market and where your customers are. What channel how are they consuming their messaging? Or is it, and social media channels behave very differently depending on the market. So for instance, like if you were more B2B and looking, with working with an influencer strategy, I think in Japan, Facebook is very different than the way we would use Facebook or Instagram. So you have to know the market. You have to do that research, or contract a company that can help you with that, because that is a really big piece. And if one person was dedicated just to that, that digital marketing piece. I've mentored a company before, and they spent so much time with digital marketing that it really took them away. They were a small company. It took them away from growing their business and doing that research about target markets, because they were spending so much money and attention on, with their digital marketing strategy. They would have been better off to contract that out to someone else. So that would be my piece of advice, to either, contract that out to a company that knows more than you do, and specifically in that target market.
And, when we're talking about early stage entrepreneurs, budgets typically are quite tight, or, sometimes even non-existent when you're starting out. So what would you, if you were to advise an entrepreneur to put their resources into one specific avenue, do you think it would be digital marketing or other methods such as, doing trade shows in that target market? Is there...
That's a hard one, but I mean, digital marketing really, like, it is the lowest cost. Like if you compare that with a television spot or newspaper spot, like if we're talking about promotion, if you talk about print versus digital, obviously the costs are much lower. But if you're talking about paid advertising, then the cost can start to go up. But it's very different. Trade show, it depends what stage the company's at. Trade show versus spending money on digital marketing. I don't know. Each company has to do their own cost benefit analysis. But if your customers don't see you, then they'll never buy your product or your service. So you have to be out there, because there's no point spending the money to enter into a target market, which could be far away from Canada, without, letting people know that you're there. So there's so many factors that go into it. But I would say, especially at the beginning stage, if you're, at the assessing the market, assessing the potential, looking for maybe, channel partners, intermediaries, I would say the trade show really is what you want to start with before you start throwing money in a market where you haven't really established your go-to-market strategy.
Thank you so much. And but I wanted to stay on you, Laura, and talk about the fundamentals of marketing and the 4 Ps and all of that. But before we get into that, Roberto, I wanted to go back to you. We have a question that I thought would be great, because I know we've talked a little bit about product-based businesses, and of course with Alejandra being here, we have that knowledge from that real life experience. But there's someone who asked a question, and I'm just going to find it now. So they've asked, can you share some insight into challenges that founders face in the SaaS space? So theoretically speaking, online services should be easier to be sold across the border. Is that true? And are there specific challenges that entrepreneurs should be prepared for?
It's a great question. Candidly, my area of expertise, I think, is outside of SaaS, but what we've heard, or what I've heard from those internally through EDC that specialize in it, or from exporters too, is a few things. One is on the restrictions point of view. And so if you're looking at exporting a SaaS-based business to a country like China, understanding the restrictions and the infrastructure in those countries is crucial. And so like most of the time, you can't drop your SaaS-based product into an international country like China without modifying it as well. So having a strong understanding of some of the restrictions in that market are crucial. Doing so with a partner, I think, is likely the best way to go about it, especially with SaaS. You don't want to go too far down product development unless you have a very strong understanding of some of those restrictions as well. And so, bit of a difficult one, I think, Isabel, on my side, but that's what I would recommend more so on the partner-based piece. And maybe one item to add on, just building on Laura's piece of conversation there too, from a digital market perspective, I think there's two areas for young entrepreneurs and startup owners to look at too. It's one, where are my consumers spending their time? And so I know Laura spent some time about that, but if we look at North America, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok are, especially from a product-based, where a lot of consumers are, consuming their time and spending kind of some of their social energy. But if we go to China, candidly, outside of TikTok, none of those are extremely popular. And so we shift to, WeChat and Weibo, Korea, for example, KakaoTalk and Naver. And so understanding where your consumers are spending their time, and I think the same can be said from a B2B standpoint as well. And so which trade shows are your clients spending time at? What groups are they spending time at as well is crucial. And then the second piece to it is, once you know where they're consuming their time and you can influence them, where can you actually distribute? And so North America, Amazon is kind of the king right now for product distribution. But if you look at China and Southeast Asia, there's a huge difference. So China, you look at AliExpress and JD.com, Southeast Asia, Lazada and Shopee. It just is a few different examples. And so as a young entrepreneur, it's often difficult to understand, where is my consumer spending time in different international markets? Where should I be distributing as well? And so I think, building off Laura's conversation, trying to understand that for your business and spend the adequate amount of time understanding that for your business could actually be detrimental when you're taking the time away from selling your product as well. And so that's where, if you look at outsourcing any piece of your business, it might be on the data side, it might be on the digital marketing side, or on the sales side, working with a freight forwarder or a consolidator who can take away some of that cultural understanding for you, and you sell directly to that consolidator, and they'll deal with the distribution side of the business too. So a few different schools of thought.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much. Alejandra, you have your hand up.
So again, my experience is US, Canada, but my background in media buying has helped a lot with this experience of launching, with digital marketing specifically. So two things. I love that you mentioned Amazon. I also love that Lora mentioned earlier, that there is a difference. There are nuances between California and New York, for example, right? It's not just US, Canada. It's like there's nuances inside of these countries. So one of the things that I found really valuable, and I know other entrepreneurs have found really valuable, was launching on Amazon. Because it just solves so many of your problems. They do fulfillment for you. You can't compete with their rates. I was very resistant to launching there because of the sustainability piece, but we did it, and they're working on being more sustainable. But one of the cool things that we've seen is we're able to see where consumers are buying your product from. Like you can see like a heat map of where your consumers are buying your product. which states your consumers are buying your products in, right? So it gives you like a really good understanding naturally of like where people are searching for a product like yours. And I would say that is very similar to what we've seen in digital marketing. I think you asked me this earlier offline, Isabel. How did you know, which states to target, for example? So what we did, I think in a previous school of thought, it was really important to get super granular and prescriptive with your ads on Meta, like, with each country and everything. One of the things that I'm finding though is we kept things really broad as we entered the US with our digital marketing. And then the algorithm ended up learning and sending ads to the people who were actually interested in them. And then, optimizing based on where these consumers are. So when we entered the US market, we just kept our ads super broad for the US, and then the algorithm started optimizing for California, New York, and all these other states, and that correlated with where these more conscious, eco-friendly consumers are, right? So it's kind of like the point of data. It's also using these tools in that way before you go crazy pitching to retailers in whatever area. Now I know I should go pitch to retailers in California. I should go pitch to retailers in New York. So there is a way to leverage that digital marketing spend to also get a lot of insights that are going to ultimately influence how you approach your sales strategy as well.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to test it out. Like, yeah, US is a massive market. So that was a really great way for you to see like, okay, where exactly in the US are my, target audience, my target customers. So really useful information for you to then go to, like you said, go to those retailers and be like, well, I can see there's a lot of customers here that want my products, so let's make something happen. Um, Lora, we've talked a lot about, market research, expanding, your brand consistency and marketing strategies. Talked a lot about all these, but maybe it's best for us to kind of go through like the fundamentals of what is marketing? What are those 4 Ps that entrepreneurs should be keeping in mind so they're not getting marketing confused with something else?
Okay, well, I'm looking at the time and I could go on and on and on, but I won't. I
I'll give you
won't.
2 minutes.
Maybe I'll drop an article in the chat. It was an article actually that I wrote on EDC's what's it called? Something Insights, Trade Insights, their blog area, really good, which explains the 4 Ps. But so the 4 Ps, the marketing mix, product, price, place, promotion. What I want to say is you just stress the interconnectivity between one and the other, one element of the marketing mix and the other. So you can't look at, your product in isolation, right? So let's say you have your product, you have to look at your product for like the marketing mix for each target market. And, you're looking at product and you're looking at what adaptations or what modifications do I need to make for this market. So you were talking about that, Alejandra, changing the packaging. So that could be an adaptation or modification to your product. So then, where you're going to sell your product or deliver your service. I mean, when I say product, I mean products and services. So what adaptations, what modifications do I need to change, translate, change the language, etc. So how you're going to place your product or deliver your service also reflects on the price that you charge. So for example, if you're going to, let's say you're a service company and you're going to, deliver, let's say you have software, maybe your software and hardware, and you deliver through an agent in the market, or your product becomes available through a value-added reseller. Well, that VAR pricing is very different than your agent pricing, or very different than if you were to go direct. I know somebody was asking about the real estate market. When I was in the clean tech space, the real estate market was one of our verticals. So knowing the players, knowing how we were going to, in the markets we were trying to enter into, knowing who our channel partner would be was super important. And then our pricing into those channel partners. And, you have different pricing sheets, pricing lists, depending on your channel partner, right? You have your retail pricing, you have, and you have different pricing depending on which country you're going into. So, and the currency. So we can't talk pricing without talking about currency. How are you going to quote? Like what's your pricing in what currency, and have you done that whole, your foreign exchange strategy? One thing I do want to mention about pricing, another thing I want to mention, if you are an exporter of products, know your Incoterms, because how can you quote a price without quoting an Incoterm? So if we're talking about a box of chocolates, a $10 box of chocolates here in Canada, where you're saying to your buyer, this is my price, X works. You come pick it up. You arrange for transportation, pick it up at my facility in Toronto or wherever, versus I'm going to deliver this box of chocolates to you, say in Italy, and I'm going to unload or offload it, and I'm going to clear it through customs, for example. You cannot quote the same $10 X works price. So understanding Incoterms, and if that's a lot, there are lots of resources out there. FITT has lots of resources on Incoterms as well. But you can't quote a price without two things: currency, and for the product exporters, without an Incoterm. Or you shouldn't, because there are so many implications if you don't choose the right Incoterm, which spells out responsibility. So price, place, like how you're going to place it. Do you have channel partners? Is it just online marketplaces? So understanding your pricing on Amazon could be, if you're a product, your pricing on Amazon could be different than your pricing, obviously, for a retailer or elsewhere. And promotion. So knowing your product, where your customers are, the market you're going into, then you determine what your promotional strategy will be. So you can see the interconnectivity between all elements. And I said it, I think, at the onset, your marketing mix has to change for each target market. It can't just be cookie cutter, because you're not taking into consideration how customers behave in that market and all those nuances that were touched upon earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Laura, for speedily getting us through those pieces. I believe Miriam actually dropped the article that you mentioned, but maybe make sure that it's the correct one that we've shared.
That is the correct one.
And we have a question from Jason, and it ties into a question that I had as well. But Roberto, it is directed towards you. So they're asking about onshoring and nearshoring trends. So are there any trends that you're noticing in the specific markets that you work in that entrepreneurs should be aware of, and they can stay ahead of the curve, if you will?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And actually, we just had a webinar with EDC, I believe it was now 3 months ago, about nearshoring and onshoring and what it means for Canadian exporters. So I definitely recommend checking that out on edc.ca. We've seen a few different trends in onshoring and nearshoring, one of which in the automotive sector. So a huge shift to producing materials here closer to home. I think the greatest example is on the EV battery side. So because of our close proximity to critical minerals, shifting some of those production facilities here in North America, while they might be more expensive from a labor perspective, actually end up working out from a transportation perspective, actually a bit cheaper. So starting to see some trends there. From a food perspective as well, we're starting to see more Canadian companies, especially those on the medium or large segment, shift some of their value add processing from internationally. And so if you look at the seafood industry, typically what happens on the West and East Coast is we'll ship the raw material of seafood out to a country like Indonesia, where they'll fine tune it and refine it into what you might see in a grocery store. So if you use the salmon example, the raw salmon is shipped out and actually in some instances imported back into canned products or processed foods, etc. We're starting to see a huge shift in a variety of industries of Canadian companies wanting to keep the production and the value add processing closer to home. And so what it does is it reduces the reliance on logistical, it reduces your cost of transportation as well. And so historically, we looked at producing or refining closer to home might be more expensive. In the interim, it's actually becoming a more premium product. We have a higher control of the quality of it as well. And oftentimes we're adhering to higher ESG standards. And so I'll use an example. We were at CIAL, the food show in Montreal, one of the largest food shows in North America. And we had some buyers from the US, particularly on the retail side. And we're introducing them to Canadian companies that work with EDC as well. And one of the number one questions they ask Canadian companies, it wasn't about the product, it wasn't about price, it was about what are your values for ESG, what are your standards for organics, how are your products grown, how are your products transported. And so it's a huge shift that candidly we have not seen in the last number of years as well. And so I know we had an earlier conversation on ESG and how much that's valued. And some early entrepreneurs might sacrifice those high ESG standards to become more price sensitive in some markets. And what we're seeing from international buyers, especially in more premium markets, is that ESG is worth all the value as well. So a couple of different pieces, but thought it was relevant as well for the conversation.
Absolutely. And I saw Alejandra giving you a little clap because that sounds very similar to your exact your stance at the moment with keeping, you know, the sustainability at the core.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think like for us, again, it was like very value driven, but I do think there's upside to that. And I think another thing that we also saw with, you know, COVID and how there was like such a massive disruption in just everything that we know, right? So many products were stuck in the middle of the ocean, unable to make it here. So I also think that there is a benefit to producing things locally and sort of avoiding delays and things like that are, you know, sometimes out of our control as well.
Absolutely. Well, so we are almost at time, and we done our best to get to a lot of the questions, some fantastic questions from our attendees here today. So if we didn't get to any of your questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can point you in the right direction with an introduction or a resource. And if there's anything that you missed today, whether it was, you know, you came in a little bit later or there was a resource that you didn't catch, we will have a full list of our resources on our Startup Global resource guide, and the full recording of this session will be on our YouTube channel in the next day or two as well. So to take us out, can I ping each of you to give a final piece of advice for anyone that is about to start that journey of marketing their business in a new market? Alejandra, I'll go to you first.
My biggest piece of advice is talk to as many people as you can who have had experience before you. I've been so blown away by the amount of support that I've had in my own journey, the amount of people willing to help and support, people that are maybe a year ahead of me, 2 years ahead of me, 3, 5, 10 years ahead of me in their journey, who have been willing to give advice. So don't be shy. Don't be scared. Reach out to people who have that experience. There are so many people in this industry that are willing to help. And that's honestly the biggest advice that I can give, not just for marketing, but absolutely any doubt that you have, somebody out there has experienced it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Roberto.
It's quite difficult, I think, when you think of all the information and the insights shared today too. I'll go in 3 quick areas. I think first one for me is partners, like partners. Knowing that the ecosystem is here to help. And so if you look at Export Development Canada, candidly, what do we care about at the baseline value? It's helping Canadian companies export their goods internationally. That's it. It's not about price, profit, anything. It's helping Canadians get their goods internationally. And so reaching out to that Team Canada ecosystem of partners, and so the Trade Commissioner Service, EDC, your financial institution as well, Startup Canada, how can this full ecosystem help you get there? And I think, Alejandra, that's an amazing takeaway as well. The full ecosystem of trade partners as well, and that includes sellers are always here to help. Maybe the last piece that I'll leave the group with too is if you're new in your international marketing strategy, consider trade shows. I know Lora talked about them and they can be costly, But a couple of ways to mitigate those costs. One would be CAN Export funding. That's through the Trade Commissioner Service as well. It's a grant program that opens up in early February that provides resources for Canadian companies to check out new markets and start to sell into new markets as well. It's a highly competitive program as well, so I consider checking out the application early, or recommend checking out the application early. And it's always a program that reaches its funding within a couple months as well. And that'll allow you to check out trade shows. And so when you think about how difficult it is to get a meeting with an international buyer, think of having all of those international buyers in one place at one time. And so if you're looking at if you're in the food industry or agri-food industry, the opportunity to talk to 50, 60, 70 different buyers at one point is invaluable information that not only can influence your sales projections into the following years, but also influence what you're currently doing with your product or service today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Laura, take us home.
Yeah, great advice. Just before I dish out my top piece of advice, often companies overlook their provincial government and the trade arm of their provincial government. So I've participated in many trade shows under the provincial umbrella, and often that is under the Canadian umbrella. So big trade shows it can be very cost effective if you participate with your provincial government, because you're one of maybe 8 companies under that umbrella. So that is a very cost-effective way of participating in trade shows. So I guess my biggest piece of advice is just to be prepared. I mean, and I can't stress that enough. So the preparation that needs to go in before you can create an international sales and marketing plan, you just need to be prepared. There's a lot of information out there. And I would just say that you have to learn yourself, or hire a champion within your company to help you navigate some of this, navigate some of the funding that's available, so navigate some of the programs. There's a lot there. So the fact that people are online today, that's good. It's a great start. You're listening, taking it in, but I would say take a breather and just start to approach this strategically. You want to export, just start with the research. Determine if it's feasible to export your product to a specific market. Get that market information, how do your customers behave? And then just break it down one piece at a time. Don't be rushed to get it all done and create a plan that really is missing certain key elements. So just get that, have somebody within your organization that can help you navigate this. Find, maybe if they don't have the information, they can reach out to someone that does. And because you don't know what you don't know, but you've got to start to break it down.
Mm-hmm. Excellent pieces of advice. Thank you so much to each of you and attendees. I hope that's if you take anything away from today, I think those 3 pieces of advice are an excellent place to start. So I thank you so much to our 3 speakers, Alejandra, Roberto, and Laura. Thank you so much for joining us today. It takes a lot of energy to show up to these things. So really do appreciate you showing up and the incredible amount of knowledge that we packed into 1 hour. We have a quick feedback poll that'll be up on your screen, and we'd love to hear from all of our attendees on how you enjoyed today's session. And as we're looking towards next year's programming, how can we best serve you and ensure that these sorts of sessions are as valuable as possible for your journey and your time. So thank you again to the attendees. Thank you so much for coming, and to our incredible partners as well for supporting the Startup Global Program, UPS, EDC, FITT, Scotiabank, Startup TNT, GS1, North Forge, Toronto Region Bot, IPIC, and NCFDC. Thank you all so much for your support. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thursday, and we will see you again in the new year with a new webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.